Jai Shri Ram. Recently, the news broke that the Dwarka Shankaracharyaji, Swami Swaroopanand Saraswatiji, had died recently. I think it was a day or two ago of a heart attack. He was about 99 years old, so obviously lived an extremely long, full life. And I wanted to share my thoughts on him because he's really someone that I look up to a lot. He's kind of a hero of mine. I think that when I look at gurus and swamis in the present day, I think they should be involved in exactly the same kind of thing that he was involved in. I mean, obviously, being one of the Shankaracharyas of one of the four or five major pithas of Advaita, they have all of these, responsibilities of teaching and all of the things that they have to do. But he also was very politically active in the sense that he was very active in the cow protection movement since the 1960s when there was that big anti-cow slaughter agitation, I think 66, which Indira Gandhi fired upon people and all of that. And he's been very vocal on that issue ever since then for, basically his entire career. And also he's talked a lot about other Hindu or Indian related things like Article 370, demographic issues, all of the different things that I look at and think, in Hindu society, we have this very unfortunate, impractical kind of a division between quote unquote religious things and quote unquote societal or political things where people will, the average normie Hindu who is not very politically active or interested, they will look at a guru or a swami and they only want to know things about karma and meditation and Brahman and, things of this nature, only purely spiritual or purely religious kinds of topics, and they're not very interested in seeing or hearing them get involved in actual social issues, where I think as people who believe in Hindutva and generally in Hindu causes, we should absolutely welcome the broad and widespread activism and inclusion of actual religious figures in our movement because of a couple reasons. One, any movement that counts on political figures to solve their problems is destined to failure because political figures, specifically in a democracy, are not really interested in solving things. They're just interested in gaining votes and gaining power and continuing to be in power. We've seen that with the BJP, and you can also see that in any country that's a democracy. You can see it anywhere. It's not limited to India, and it's not limited to Hindus. And so getting actual people in society caring about issues, being activists, this is what's necessary. And like I said, he did that with cow protection. He did that with various actual law-based things like 370 and others. He also did it with the issue of Christian conversions. He actually was seeing people who were converted to Christianity back in some ashram that he operated in like Bihar or one of those states in the eastern part of the country kind of. And, these are all the things that we need to understand, that we can't think of our movement as being limited to issues that are talked about in political talk shows, because political talk shows are not concerned with Hindutva or concerned with Hindu causes. They're just concerned with what are the current events in terms of politics and law and legislation. What are people talking about on Twitter? This is what they're going to talk about. They're not motivated by anything different from, say, CNN or any other American news organization is, in the sense that they're not actually trying to give you information about relevant topics. They're just trying to produce a TV show. So we should definitely not, I think you should watch the news and follow those current events also, in elections and all those things. But we should understand this is just a small subsection of a broader movement, which is actually much more about society and people and values than it is about laws. And, another example of this related to him would be anybody that watches like Sangam Talks or any of these like vaguely Hindu or Hindutva related YouTube channels or follows Indian politics. A couple years ago, I believe it was 2018, it was a big story that the Shabarimala Ayyappa temple in the state of Kerala would be allowing women in, which, as we all know, this deity is a Naisthik brahmachari and he's not supposed to have women between the ages of menstruation there and all of that. And I was really happy at the fact that people were very active about this. They wanted to fight against it. They were bringing up a lot of reasoning as to why what the feminist narrative is kind of saying is not valid. And you also saw a very large number of women saying that the feminist narrative is not valid. And I think they had a hashtag called ready to wait or something like that, meaning women who are ready to wait until they're at the age where they can go there without joining this agitation to let women of all ages in. So I think that was very refreshing and positive and all that. But what I did find irritating about the fact that this became such a big issue is because 2 years before this happened, I'm pretty sure that was in 2018. In 2016, another Hindu temple with this same practice of there is some story about the deity for which you are not supposed to let women into the temple. They were forced by the law to start to let women into the temple. That is the Shani temple in Shankaracharyaji in Maharashtra, which they had it's been like a 400-year-old or some practice. I don't really know how old it is in Shabarimala. I don't know if it's older or not as old, but it's a traditional practice that's existed, I think, since this temple has existed, that you're not supposed to let women in. And the Bombay High Court forced them to start letting women in 2016. Now, the only reasonable explanation that I have as to why the Shabarimala thing became so popular and the Shingnapur thing didn't is because the Shabarimala thing went to the Indian Supreme Court, whereas the Shani Shingnapur thing only went to the Bombay High Court and didn't go beyond that. That's literally the only thing that I can think of as to why this didn't become an issue, because again, this happened before the Shabarimala ruling anyway. But the Dwarka Shankaracharyaji was involved in trying to, I don't know how involved he was in like legal proceedings, but he was definitely involved in like activism and raising awareness of the fact that this is wrong and, all of those kinds of things at a point in time where I didn't really see other people talking about it. Now, maybe that's just because he has his ear closer to the ground. Maybe it's because he's in Dwarka, which is relatively closer to Maharashtra than, any of the other Pitams is. I have no idea. But this is another thing that he was involved in as well. And I think we have to understand that, like I said, the news doesn't speak for actual worldviews or issues or anything. We have to understand that the fact that you as a right-leaning, Hindutva-leaning person may get into arguments about politics with leftists, or you might see leftist narratives in media and get very angry about it, that doesn't actually mean that defeating leftists in the political sphere is the number one issue that we have to deal with, because it's just very emotive for people, right? People have a knee-jerk reaction to kind of argue on the internet against people who disagree with them on a variety of mostly political topics, right? But I think most of that is a distraction because, I've been on the internet for as long as anybody else, I guess. And when I was a teenager, I liked to argue with people on the internet too, because it's just part of being a teenager. If you're interested in politics and you're a teenager, you're just going to argue about politics with people. It's just natural. That's just going to happen. But as you grow up and mature after some time, you start to see, people just have different value systems. You're not actually going to get through to a person by arguing with them online. It really doesn't matter what kind of evidence you show them. It doesn't matter what kind of a context you give them. They just are coming from a totally different set of values than you're coming from. So what is actually important in this movement, if we're going to call it a movement, is finding like-minded people getting organized and becoming active. And I think what the Dwarka Shankaracharya had done throughout his entire career is he really exemplified that to the nth degree in a time period before social media or the internet or, I mean, even really widespread electricity in India. If you think about how, I mean, like I said, he was 99 years old and he had been active since at least the 60s. I'm not really sure how old that he was when he became a guru and all that, but he's been at least politically active and relevant and socially active since at least the mid 1960s, when, of course, I mean, this is the time in which most of our parents were probably being born. So, nowadays we have much more of an opportunity and avenues to organize, meet like-minded people, strategize, and do all those things, which is great and it's positive and we need to use it. The only problem is it also means that those who are fighting against us to try to push Islam or push Christianity or push, Ambedkarism or push wokeism, those people also have those same abilities. And so it's that much more important that we're out there giving people our message and trying to bring them towards our worldview. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.